But first, 6 weeks in, and the honeymoon continues for the new Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. And like all the most luxurious of honeymoons, they're best experienced abroad, right? Who'd have thought through that election campaign that Albo's main priorities included flying off to Tokyo to have a yarn with President Joe Biden, or making sure those in uniform in the Middle East were thanked, or even the rarely addressed issue of gate-crashing a NATO meeting. We heard virtually nothing of any of this through that campaign. And who knows, he may even turn up sometime this week, tonight maybe, joining the conga line of politicians bravely stepping foot inside Ukrainian territory to give Vladimir Putin the bird. We know he was invited and he's done everything else on his itinerary but visit Ukraine. How can he do any wrong? Waving the Australian flag proudly, shaking hands with world celebrity leaders, smiling and laughing about, well, meaningless small talk, and not having to address the chronic problems that exist in this country right now. These are not the hard yards that Albo is doing. These are the easy meters as an international diplomat. No wonder his predecessor and his former foe, Bill Shorten, is applauding from home.
I think Anthony Albanese is doing a quantum level of better performance than Mr Morrison. I mean, be it on the local stage where there are a lot of problems in the NDIS to the international stage. Under Prime Minister Albanese, Foreign Minister Wong, we are now seeing Australia taken more seriously again.
Bill can't stop electioneering. Can someone please send him a message? The election campaign is over. He's won. Of course, Albo is a quantum ahead. He's not dealing with a lack of vaccines. He's not dealing with the fright of a pandemic or economic ruin, the potential for recession or natural disasters. And just on these floods, the latest natural disaster, can you imagine for a second the outcry from the left if Scott Morrison had been in Europe and not here during another serious flood event in Western Sydney? They'd all go in for the kill. But Albo, of course, he's on a honeymoon, swanning the world stage with his girlfriend. Even Conservative commentator Gerard Henderson wrote glowingly of Albo in The Australian this weekend on the government's very minor decision to shave the number of advisors for independent MPs back to where it was. Gerard said Albo had his priorities right and was correct in ignoring the discontent of a few independents. Fair call. But let's understand this clearly, that the Labor government machine is using Albo's, a Women's Weekly World Discovery Tour to extend the honeymoon and keep him out of harm's way. Because his near-fatal bungling of that election campaign has taught them all to ensure that Albo must operate in a soft and safe cocoon. 6 weeks in, and he's avoiding the difficulty of solving the cost of living, as he'd promised he'd do. He's avoided tackling petrol prices, as he'd promised he'd do, reforming aged care, as he promised he'd do, with the help of those 24/7 nurses, of course. And he's avoiding solving the housing crisis as well. Now, maybe that's because his shared equity scheme is so complicated and riddled with holes, it's close to impossible to figure out. I'll give him that one. My point is, it is so much easier from the cheap seats of Parliament to find fault, make bold promises and play a small target. And for mine, Albo hasn't even begun the real job of governing Australia and getting to work on a whole raft of domestic crises, because they are crises. They're the hard yards, and we can only hope that his next big trip will be back home to Canberra to deal with those issues. That'd be a news story in itself. He returns to Australia because this World Discovery Tour does absolutely nothing to deal with any of the problems Australians are now experiencing. Come on, Albo. If you can hear me from all the way on the other side of the world, you've had 6 weeks. Enough of the handshaking, the small talk, the photo opportunities. Time to get to work and show us what you meant about a better government, what you meant about a better future. You better hurry up, because right now it's just been about creating a very expensive load of diplomatic puff.